Hello, everybody, and welcome to ABL Down on the Farm, episode 25, where we talk all things prospecting, but most especially prospecting the ABL, a 30-team dynasty league with a glorious 20 slots for a total of 600 prospects in our league, which certainly gives us a lot to talk about. And tonight, I am very happy to be joined by a first-time guest on the show and a recent owner in the ABL. He is affectionately known as the Other Frank. But he's Frank in his own right, and he owns the Miami Marlins. And without further ado, I'm going to bring him in. And hey, Frank, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Doing good, Steve. Doing good.
Good. I'm very happy that you could be here. Thanks for coming on. And I'm going to refer to you as Frank and not the other Frank, just because it's a little bit easier. But, maybe one day we'll get Frank from the Cubs on the show. But for tonight, you're the first Frank. You're not the other Frank. You're the Frank.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm that somewhere. So
that's right. So listen, you've been in the ABL. This is your first season, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you took over the Marlins, which was a team a little bit of disarray when you took over. And you popped into the fire, but you've turned it around. You've got a competitive team this year, and in a very. And so I. You're adjusting around the club. Kind of
Steve, really quick. I don't know if we have a chat anywhere. It sounds like you were clicking from my end. I'm not sure.
Oh, all right. But sounds bad. Hold on one second.
Oh, okay. No, hold on. You're good now, I think.
Okay. Thank you for the. Sometimes you have technical difficulties with the sound. Good. So I'm interested in hearing. A little bit about how you've balanced the present and the future in the league in terms of how to be competitive now, but keeping the minor leagues in a place that you're happy. But before we get to that, I'm just interested in hearing a little bit about your dynasty background, what you were doing before you came to the ABL, and kind of how you think about prospecting in general.
All right. So I first started, I guess, with not just baseball, but I don't know, I guess strategic thinking or team building or anything. Back when I was 6 years old, and I don't know if you know of what this is, but there is a video game that came out around then called Pokemon, or Pocket Monsters, as it was translated. And when I got that game, I wasn't. It just kind of it looked fun. I saw it in Nintendo Power. I was like, oh, this is kind of cool, So I get it, and I'm like, what the heck is all this? I don't know. So I got like a strategy guide, which. Back in the day, there was no internet. You had to go and buy a book of, strategies for things, or, you can't just have free access to stuff. So that was my first foray, because the book would explain the statistics of each Pokemon, what they kind of evolved into, what their stats were, their attack and their defense. You had to, dare I may say, manage a roster or manage a team of 6 Pokemon going into a battle and trying to figure out the strengths, his water type would be strong against fire type, kind of et cetera like that. So that was for the very first kind of dip. And I'm like, oh, this is cool. I remember running around the house, when I, beat the Elite Four and Gary for the first time. So I was like, all right, this is kind of really, really cool. And then, would play strategy games and stuff, just kind of up through teenage years. And baseball specifically, we did some of my high school buddies, we just did a Yahoo dynasty league to kind of start out with, but there's literally no prospects. So you can pick up just a top 10 prospect just off the waiver wire and stuff. So it was a little just okay, just this is just it's fine. But it was in college when I first got access to MLB Network, and at that time, I don't know if it's still a thing. I don't think maybe it is. There was a show called Clubhouse Confidential. And that was with Brian Kenny. And that was when the first kind of sabermetric hidden, in literally inside baseball of things. And I was like, all right. So then I got Baseball Between the Numbers and other books and stuff. And I'm like, all right, I'm reading all this stuff about let's crank up baseball. So I joined a 10-teamer with 20 prospects roster. So that was 200 total, as my first, I guess, formal dynasty league. And then just kind of build it up from there. That was about a decade ago. So I started with that one. I did a 12. I still am a 12-team keeper league. a couple 16 teamers, one that I'm still a part of, one that folded. And then I joined the ABL 4, which is the same league I know Matt talked about. No, here he's the Mets, but in ABL 4 he's the Angels. He joined that league maybe the same time I did. It's been a few years I've been in that league now. Then I did the regulation league. I've been in that one for 2 years, and then we had a spot opening in this league, and I was like, yeah, let's go all in on this. Let's see, let's see how I'm doing with it. So,
well, I want to pause for a moment and talk about Pokemon.
Yeah. Dude, okay.
That's the first time I've ever heard somebody say that Pokemon was like a foray into fantasy baseball. So that's fabulous. Okay.
Thank you. But
I also want to note that, like, when you're talking about going to buy a strategy guide because there's nothing online yet, when I started playing fantasy baseball, I had to use USA Today to get statistics, and you had to actually compile stats by hand.
Like that was back in the day when like you had to look at the newspaper, I think, or as you're saying, you guys would have the stats and then you literally would
you get the paper the next day,
yeah,
you get the box score, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
It was a real late West Coast game. Even the West Coast scores wouldn't be in USA Today because they had the last print edition, like, of all the major newspapers. So yeah, you might have to wait like 2 days to find out how your players did. That's
so crazy.
I know all about bookwork.
Was there really quick? So I didn't finish it, but I started reading Ron Chandler's Fantasy Expert that kind of talked about like the history. I didn't realize this. So we had like a phone number that's still active where it's like time and weather that you could call, and it's like kind of a 900 number. Apparently, in reading Fantasy Expert, you could call to get stats. Like you could call like that. So that was a thing. That was a legit. Wow.
We've come a long way, baby.
Yeah. How far we've come. I literally got, the screen here with, all the, like fan tracks and stuff. I can pull up MLB whenever I want.
Yeah.
Man, having to make a phone call. How about that?
Yeah. I was in a league where I had to make trades by mail.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
How does that work? If two things arrive the same day, like.
Yeah, there was a delay. It could literally take weeks to work out a trade. When you think about that, in terms of like ABL, it's like everything's so fast, right? I mean, we get annoyed
right?
When an hour goes by after you've made an offer and you don't get a response. So
I know. Yeah, trade block and 15 minutes later you get But yeah, back in the day, it has been a fortnight since I've heard your response to my recent inquiry regarding.
Exactly. So tell me a little bit about because you have a considerable amount of dynasty experience and certainly fantasy baseball experience before you come to ABL. So how do you approach prospecting, and how maybe has your prospecting approach evolved over time?
My first foray into prospecting was it was just so I know. This guy's a high bat speed, so he's going to be good. Or this guy's he's got a 60 hit tool. He's going to be awesome. Now I almost treat it like I know nothing. I know nothing, John Stone. You know nothing. Because it's just so, and things are kind of evolving too, right? We're just starting to get, real minor league data that is actually tracked. And there's some of that we don't even get. We have to rely on kind of other sources for that. I guess from my experience, you've just seen so much of there's no way this prospect's going to be good. And then they come up and they're awesome. Or they come up and they take a few years and then they're good. So I guess I really try to nowadays just keep an open mind for things, not really be too concrete. Obviously there's some principles, there's things that I like. I don't even know if maybe there's a particular reason why I like what I like. As weird as that sounds, maybe it's just a personal bias that I've thought that this type of prospect is slightly more successful than not. I really don't know. But if I keep an open mind and I go into something, I'm all right, if I make this trade and it's a mistake, I can learn from it, the old, learn and grow and, all that stuff from making a mistake. But just to be really conscious of doing things and not, taking, trading this player away for granted. I guess I'm maybe risk averse regarding trading someone away, like without doing my homework on them, just because like I don't want to regret that. I want to really be sure of that. So before it was just like, oh yeah, I know everything because no one else knows nothing because I have the inside baseball knowledge, right? I'm the only one reading sabermetrics, but when you get to this level, everyone's just so doggone good at this that there's no way I could say that like I have an edge over someone, So just to keep an open mind and, just to kind of making sure to keep looking at things, keep updating on players. Cause I guess if there is one adage that I do want to follow, I cannot remember the specific player, but it's from the book, The Only Rule It Has to Work. That's when Ben Lindbergh and Sam Miller took over like an independent baseball team for like a season and tried to turn around. There was a picture in there, and I tried to look this up beforehand. I couldn't find it, but it was basically like everything that prospect did or that player did before doesn't matter because that's what they're doing now.
Yeah.
And so with that open-mindedness, I don't want to like discount or exclude someone, just because, they're just getting lucky, or no, maybe there's something actually there. Maybe there's something that, okay, maybe it's like they're pulling the ball more. It's not just an ISO streak where they're hitting doubles. Maybe it's, they're tapping into something like that. It's just like a quick example. So that's, I guess, one thing to where just, kind of stay updated, check on guys from time to time. If you have a watch list or whatever, that's maybe something that I do now as before, where it just be like, because I know everything, I don't have to pay attention to that guy, or I'm too all in on a guy where maybe there's flags of like, hey, this guy's struggling. Like you can drop him, or, what I mean? Or you could try to train him, etc.
Well, let me pause you right there and just touch on something you said, which is, maybe something has changed. I'm paraphrasing for the prospect. And, I think there's a lot of value in having that mindset with prospects because they are developing in ways that major league players aren't necessarily developing. They develop at a different rate, and sometimes it can be actually quite rapid. Something can get unlocked. Sometimes that can be physical. There's just like physical growth, right? Other times it can be coaching. There's a change in approach, right? So, for example, with particularly young prospects, the teenage prospects in particular, you can have rapid physical development. And all of a sudden you can see spikes in exit velocity, for example. And a guy will go from being like a singles, doubles hitters to a home run hitter, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
The same, swing. There's nothing really has changed. Just he grew into his body, right? And with pitchers, right, what you often see is the coaching staff gets a hold of them, and something's different. They change the grip, they change the arm angle. The delivery is tweaked in some way, and that can happen just when they get a hold of the prospect for the first time. Sometimes the prospect moves up a level, different coach, and oftentimes when they change organization.
Yes.
Right? I mean, and I know you're a Guardians fan. We were talking before the show, and so Cleveland, for example, is renowned for taking pitchers and making them good.
Cleveland pitching machine, baby. That's what we do.
Right. So there's definitely something to that. I've got a guy on my minor league roster right now in all my leagues, Alejandro Rosario of the Rangers, who is a late draft pick, collegiate player. Had a terrible ERA in college, ERA over 7. Still got drafted by the Rangers because they saw something in him. They drafted him. They changed his delivery, and now he's dominating.
Yeah. Now it's not a 7 ERA. Yeah. Now it's
that was lights out. But the only reason I got onto this kid because he wasn't on any lists before the season. He was not on anybody's first-year player draft board really. And I know that to be a case because he was a free agent in every single league I'm in. I read about him in Baseball America, and they just said, this kid is seems to have changed his delivery, and now he's throwing strikes and he's getting swings and misses, whereas before his fastball wasn't getting swings and misses. And they broke it down a little bit into it, and then there have been subsequent articles repeating this. But as soon as I read that first article, I jumped on him.
Yeah.
Because it's gold, right? When you find a guy like that. So I agree with you. Really keeping an open mind and saying this actually could be different. Than the for it. It's just so much more so true with prospects, particularly younger ones. I found it the case. Now, you mentioned before, there are some likes and dislikes, which may be your own kind of idiosyncratic biases or whatever. But what are some of those?
So originally, like, and this applies maybe more to like 10 to 16 teamers, because in 30 teamers, it's so, things are so kind of fluid and stuff. But like at the end of the day, you have to be able to hit the ball.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if I had to have a right, like, so if I had to pick one, it is the hit tool, because kind of is what you said too, like guys can grow into power. So if the hit tool is there, even if the power numbers aren't really there, like if the average is low and it's like kind of a higher fly ball rate, if there's projected physical growth there, and the thing that prospect is doing is proper, it's just not clearing the fence and it's just fly ball outs right now, that's what you want, right? And eventually, like, those will start turning into hits, or doubles, and then possibly home runs. The person that I wanted to bring up that I dropped at the beginning of the season and picked up again is a Tampa Bay prospect named Cooper Kinney, who he had like shoulder problems and stuff too, and he had like a good hit tool, but the power wasn't really there. And now all of a sudden, I guess I was reading like he slimmed down, which is kind of weird to say that, oh, he slimmed down, so now he's like hitting for more power. Like, I don't know if that's like, I remember we had Yandy Diaz, who's on the Tampa Bay Rays now, where like his biceps were so big that like he couldn't elevate the ball kind of thing. So, is that what he's doing? But, Kinney now is starting to produce some more power and stuff. And it's like, all right, he made a change. I don't want to just have that sit there when I know the hit tools, at least from the scouting perspective, I think is like, 55, or, it's a good hit tool. So even if I'm wrong, like he's showing it, he's 21 years old and high A. So, age is right around, the median for what you want. And, if that's something that, let's try and go for it. So.
Right. Well, you also just implicitly mentioned age relative to level is something that you think about.
Yes. Oh yeah. And that's, I guess that's been the flavor of my ABL season. Like, I think 4 or 5 of my pickups have been either young for age players. Like the other Max Muncy I traded for, Frederick Ben Cosme. I'm going to annihilate that last name, of Baltimore. So like, 21 years old, AA. Edson Paulino from Boston, middle infielder, 21 years old, AA. Yeah. There's someone else that I'm blanking on right now, but but even like the super extreme end, and this is kind of maybe foreshadowing like the top 10 analysis real quick. I inherited Nelson Rada, who's 18 years old in AA. Yeah. So it doesn't matter if he's a 71 WRC plus. He's 18 years old in AA, and he's not embarrassing himself. So I guess, whether I'm maybe kind of overreaching on that, I don't know. But, that's been, I guess, something where I'm like, all right, because if he repeats the level, because you've talked about repeating levels before, that maybe that can kind of be like a possible knocker, not the most like optimal thing. If you're young for the level though, and, you grow in a little more power, you make adjustments and stuff, I think that that's fine. Like that's,
it can be.
It's better. Yeah.
It can be.
So,
yeah, I think, the other thing I've mentioned before, and I'm a believer in this, is that if a major league organization advances a player who's young for the level, and they have the confidence that he can perform at that level despite his age, that's something I consider. I mean, it's not foolproof, right? I mean, there are guys who get advanced too aggressively and they struggle, and we might be talking about one of them later on in the show. But it's a good sign, right? And one of the, I think you mentioned this a little bit before, Frank. You said, if he's young for his level and he's not hitting home runs, I'm not as concerned. Right. Oh, yeah. And I have that view as well. Like, I look at players, and the metrics I look at for a player who's young for his level are different than a guy who's like on par for his level. For guys who are on par for their level, I'm very focused on ISO, like how much power are they generating, raw power.
Absolutely.
Certainly, I'm looking at contact rates and walk rates, right? But I'm really interested: are they growing into power? Are they going to be a fantasy asset? Because fantasy power is really valuable in almost every scoring format. Contact rate, for the reason that you stated, I want to make sure they can get on base. But walk rate goes into that as well. But for younger players, I'm not as concerned with ISO. I'm more interested in hearing about their contact rate, their walk rate. Like, are they being overmatched or are they making good contact, right?
Oh yeah.
And line drive rate is interesting to me for players that are they hitting just ground balls to getting overpowered or fooled, or are they actually driving the ball with some authority? I might look for some exit velocity reports, how they're doing there.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Because the power should come, right? If the scouting reports are through as they grow into their body. So these are all things you think about when you're evaluating prospects. So that's interesting. Any other kind of characteristics, traits that you are particularly fond of? We talked a lot about hitters. I don't know if you want to talk about pitchers at all.
Yeah. I guess the last thing for hitters, I don't actually walk rate, not overrated, but I would rather have, if we're talking about someone that has a higher power potential, if that strikeout rate's lower, like let's say they're only walking 4.5%. But if they have like a 22% K rate and they have an ISO like above 200, or they have an ISO or like they're doing like, yeah, I'm not gonna let that stop me from wanting to try to, because it's, if you can get to that power in games, even if you don't have the highest OBP, especially for ABL specifically, I know you've talked about this, like you don't get negative points for striking out.
Yeah.
But there is, so like you would think maybe that plays more to the strikeout, but there is something to putting the ball in play with the new offensive rules and everything else too. Yeah. So it does still have value, even if they're not getting on base, even if they're not walking, just getting the ball in play still has some value. And then you obviously get the nice power boost too, that, you know what I mean? That,
yeah,
that
I do. Yeah, I think part of what you're saying is that, the metrics that you look at will in part hinge on the, the skill set of the prospect, right? If you're expecting a bat first prospect, you might be more concerned with the walk rate.
Yeah.
Right. Because you're not necessarily going to get points generated from home runs as much as you would with another prospect. Conversely, if you're talking about a power, driven prospect, particularly a power and speed prospect,
yes.
the walk rate might not be as important, although certainly a nice walk rate helps with the speed.
Yeah.
But you're looking at different metrics. You're emphasizing different things. There's a big difference, for example, with a power hitting prospect who has a 20% K rate or 25% K rate rather than a 30-35%. And conversely, a bat first prospect that's striking out 25% of the time,
Yeah, or someone,
right? Particularly one who doesn't steal bases. So those are all factors you think about. The speed factors in. So what about the pitching side?
I'm terrified of pitchers right now, honestly. Again, no more foreshadowing, but just losing that time because, like you said, as pitchers progress levels, they're going to get different pitching coaches. There's going to be different things you're tinkering with. Like pitching is just so gosh darn hard to do, right? So if you get, obviously Tommy John's a big one, but like shoulder surgery or, like stuff with the legs, like hamstring or, or like forearm or, just all those different things. I don't have the exact data of how much more prevalent it is, but at least maybe the stereotypical, what it kind of seems is that pitchers miss just more time just because they, they're kind of at risk for that. So it's kind of a double-edged sword because Tom talked about this too when he was on, where it's like, there potentially is more risk with pitchers if this data and stuff is accurate, where, it is like, there are more injuries, kids are trying to throw, like, it's just, Tommy John is just like, all pitchers are going to be bionic, man. They're all going to have surgeries or they're going to have this new internal brace procedure or something. But the reward is just so gosh darn big. Like, to have, like Gary with Paul Skeens right now.
Yeah.
That's insane. That's literally insane because of how we have such a high market premium on, like, I paid $19 for Lance Lynn. Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
No,
like, Cal mentioned that like Nick Pivetta was going to go for $20. Like, when you can save that money and get high-end production, that just has you at such a market advantage. So it's that, so like pitching as a whole, to kind of be cautious, but at the same time, I don't want to completely discount, because if you hit, like, then boom, you're ready to rock and roll. So That's again, I don't know. If there is something that I would prefer them to be taller, because I do remember Sixto Sanchez throwing 100 miles an hour and being only 6 foot. I know there is Marcus Stroman. I know Yamamoto, he's 5'10", I think. Coming in, that stuff's good. The wear and tear over a season and trying to keep that high end velocity or the high end spin rates, like all the work that's putting on your body, I won't invest too much into that per se. Again, I don't want to completely not look at someone, but if someone's, even if they're maybe just 6'1", if they're physically peaked out, I may be less likely to go that route than someone that's 6'3", 6'4".
Yeah. So frame matters.
Yes.
Yeah.
At least for me, yes.
Yeah. I've talked a lot about frame for both hitters and pitchers, but particularly for pitchers, highlighting a lot of the things that you just said. I loathe pitchers who are 6 feet or under. It's not that I'll never draft one or pick one up, but there's just added risk. Particularly as a starter. Many of them end up as relief pitchers. And it's fine to get them off the wire for $1 in a draft, when they're relief pitchers, and maybe it will be a lights out, setup man or close. But
absolutely.
Totally different kettle of fish, in terms of investing a draft pick during, the first year player draft on a guy like that, particularly an early one. Now, you're going to strike gold every once in a while, like Paul Skeens, right? Yes. But I also remember people getting excited about Max Meyer several years ago, who's, by the way, under 6. Right. And Skeens can get hurt too, obviously. I don't wish that on Gary, but it's all, he throws really hard. He's
starting the All-Star game. He's not going to not throw hard.
Exactly. So definitely risk. So you look for frame. Anything else you're looking for in pitchers before we transition to the top 10?
Again, I don't know how much data there is kind of on this, but one of the books I have back on the shelf is it's a pitching book that Bill James and someone else did. And what I remember from that is, and kind of skimming through that, is they were worried as far back as the 1950s about sliders and how that affect pitchers' elbows. So I don't think, I was able to see this for Skeens a little bit, where his AAA data, it was the slider percentage and then converting to the majors. So again, we'll talk about Paul Skeens. But if someone is very slider heavy, I do worry about that, or I at least don't want to invest a high pick in that, because again, I don't know. I don't have the data. I know that's been talked about where sliders can potentially have, and I think that's been discussed in the Discord often. Is it velocity? Is it trying to generate spin? Is it the type of pitch that you're throwing? If you watch a pitcher throw a slider in slow motion, that looks like that's something a human being shouldn't be doing. But you know what I mean? So
neither's hitting a baseball for that matter.
Yeah, exactly. It's I'm going to track 100 miles an hour and just perfectly, angle it over a fence and stuff. So I guess I would prefer someone to have a fastball or something that's more kind of, maybe bread and butter type than heavily relying on a slider. Because, super random example, but Michael Fulmer, I knew he's, I think has had he was kind of someone that was good Detroit pitching prospect, but he had something, and then he was a reliever, but then he had Tommy John again because of the sliders he threw in relief. So, for us, I worry about Scott Barlow a little bit, because he doesn't really even throw a fastball anymore. It's just, so even in relief too, if you're going to have relief risk, if you're relying on that slider, it's still something all right, if you end up being a reliever and you're awesome, great. I don't, especially in a 30 teamer, okay, cool. But if you're just missing the time, and again, whether it's a slider or something else more in for that, but at least for what I know right now, the slider is probably, if they're too relying on it, I want to kind of discount that prospect a little bit and not invest too high of a pick on them.
I get it. So you're fading the slider, particularly if there's a overemphasis on that relative to the fastball.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's interesting. In the Prospect Handbook this year, I started weighting individual skills for pitchers, but one of the things I did was I gave more weight to fastballs. Right.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
Right. And one of the reasons I did that is because, I think it's really a good indicator if a guy's a major league fastball relative, as a barometer of potential success. But it also shows that they can establish that pitch and not over rely on a secondary pitch like a slider to get people out. They can rip back and overpower somebody if they need to. So I gave that slightly more weight I did not track people if their secondary pitch is a slider, but that's something certainly to consider for next year's edition. I am certainly considering changes, but that's interesting discussion.
Oh yeah, and especially because like I said, for Skeens, it came up in AAA SS data, at least on Fangraphs. Like that's the main one I use for it. So yeah, I don't know how prevalent is it? Prevalent, is that the word? Like how easily accessible all that data is, but yeah, if there's a way to consistently incorporate that, like that would be cool, at least just to kind of see like, okay, he's really relying on, the slider or anything else. So yeah, I think that'd be cool.
Yeah, we're slowly eking towards a more perfect handbook, but we know. But speaking of the handbook, let's transition and talk about that because I thought this was a good opportunity to kind of do a mid-year check-in. So let me just pull up the handbook, and we're just going to look at the top 10. But I thought it'd be interesting to share some thoughts about who I had ranked preseason in the top 10. Hopefully, everybody can see that now.
It's coming for me.
Yeah, so it's Jackson Chourio, Jackson Holiday, the two Jacksons at the top, followed by Langford, who's now in the major leagues, Andrew Painter, who's missing another year, Dylan Cruz, who's getting promoted and moved up the ladder, the aforementioned Paul Skeens, Ricky Tiedemann, who now is no longer pitching this season, James Wood, Walker Jenkins, and Ethan Salas, everybody's favorite whooping post. So anything jump out here? Or any particular guy on this list that you want to talk about to start?
I mean, the most interesting one, I think, to maybe kind of, debate the point of the pitcher is Andrew Painter, right? Because he's missing the season. And in really trying to think of like an evaluation of like, what would I like trade for him, or what type of, because he is like, from all intents and purposes, like he's awesome. Like he's an awesome pitcher, but if he's like, just we're gonna assume he's coming back. Okay, he'll probably need a year to like fully get like velocity stuff and back and whatnot. The other thing too is like, there was all the talk he was gonna get promoted. How much time does he need? Like if he's has to spend a year in AAA and he does decent, like where should he rank then? Like what? So I was kind of thinking like, I don't know where he should maybe kind of be valued at this point. Like, is he more of a maybe like a top 30 or top 40 prospect, or is he someone that's maybe like, I don't really want to say lower than that, but like I don't know. Like I do like Bryce Eldridge from the Giants, so I think that if I had Painter and Eldridge is available and that's like a 1-for-1, I think he's in the new BA. I think he's like between 40 and 50. Kind of in that range. So for me, but again, like I'm a little more, like kind of risk averse with pitchers. So that's, that's something maybe I would do, but maybe I'm thinking about it wrong. Cause again, if he gets promoted and he's awesome, then like I just, give someone free money. Like,
right. Well, it's true. Look, what concerns me about Tiedemann at this point, obviously the injury concern. But it's also that he has not shown an ability when he's healthy to go deep in games.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, and he's struggled a little bit in AAA too. Like,
and he just he's been rehabbing, so some of the struggles maybe because he wasn't fully healthy, maybe some of the failure to go deep in games is because they were babying him. But he has not shown durability or the ability to pitch deep in games, and that is really concerning if you're holding on to a Ricky Tiedemann, because there's a chance he's never going to pitch in the majors at this point.
Yes,
and even if he does pitch in the majors, there's a very high likelihood that he's going to be a relief pitcher. Which drastically changes his value. He could be a lights out closer. But I would have concerns if somebody was trying to trade me Ricky Tiedemann at this point. I'd have concerns. But just because he's never shown the ability thus far to be a big league frontline pitcher. Or even 3 or 4. He can't go past 6 innings. I mean, where
so even if he comes up, he's just a 5 and dive guy. That's like, oh, okay, is he gonna get a win? Like in quality starts league, like is he gonna get the quality start? At least with Painter, I don't know offhand, like specifically, how long he goes and get. My perception is he goes longer in games because Arsenal's better. But so so at least that with him. Whereas with Tiedemann, it's like, oh crap, maybe you know.
Yeah, I think those they're interesting to me anyway, juxtaposition, because Painter I feel differently about. Like
Mhm.
Painter, I feel has the potential to still be a starter. So I would value him personally higher. I think their
Yeah.
arsenals are pretty similar. Though you can't see a bit of a delta in terms of where I have them ranked at the beginning of the year in terms of their grades, but not a substantial one. But yeah, I mean, Painter at least is somebody I feel like, all right, when he comes back, if he's healthy, and we've seen this before with pitchers where they do come back and they can pitch, I have a better sense of what I could be getting. Whereas Tiedemann, I just have no idea. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. It's, the, what's is it Family Guy or what is it? Or it's like, oh, you want a boat, or you could choose this box. Maybe it's a boat. Maybe it's,
right,
like,
right.
Or maybe it's not. Like,
Maybe it's a bag of beans.
yeah.
Maybe it's magic beans.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I just don't know with Ricky. So I agree. And look, they both highlight, as we were talking about before, the risks of starting pitchers. Now, what the handbook has historically done, look, it's historically 2 years. I've placed a heavy emphasis on scouting grades. And last year, I integrated some other factors or more specific skill grades. I've always had injury risk as a factor for the prospect. But I mean, one of the things I'm contemplating for next year's edition is to increase the value, the weight I give to injury risk. So you would see guys like Andrew Painter and Tiedemann fall further down, notwithstanding their core skill sets. And I haven't figured out what that would be, the weight, and how I would distribute it, but it's something I'm thinking about because it would equally apply to hitters too. But I think it's just something to consider in terms of evaluating prospects for one of the reasons you said, lost development time.
Absolutely.
And it matters. And also, a lot of these prospects that we're talking about now got impacted by COVID. So they already had built in, lost development time, right? So that's one of the things I'm contemplating for next year's edition. Again, I'll figure that out. And I'll need Tom to help me with the math. Let somebody smarter than me do that. Who else jumps out to you, or any other observations you might have about the top 10?
I mean, it's interesting. So with the two Jacksons and Ethan Salas, like, I mean, they're just young. Like, like Jackson Trio. When I checked for this, he had 93 WRC plus, and that's like, okay, you're 20 years old in the majors. Not everyone. I forget how old Juan Soto was when he came up. I think he was like 21, or I think Vlad was like 21 or 22, and like, not every young top prospect is going to come up and light the league on fire, and like that's fine. Like he's 20 years old. Kind of the same thing with Jackson Holiday too. Like he's 20 years old, or maybe he's 21 years old.
20.
Yeah. So it's like, even though you have one that's playing in the majors still and is league average for 20 versus one that mightily struggled, like I can't sit here and definitively say, oh, this Jackson is better than this Jackson, because they're just so, there's just so much potential there, and for it to go in every which way. And then with Ethan Salas, I want to check, like I think he's 18 or he's 17 right now.
He's 18. He's turned 18.
Yeah, so he's, like, are we gonna just completely discount him now because he's 18 years old and he's was promoted aggressively, and kind of like he plays at catcher, which it's an interesting position because, like, there's some philosophies where you kind of discount that. There's some where it's not, because, you're not going to get as many plate appearances. But if you hit on a catch, like if you hit on a Rutschman, or you hit on, like, I got lucky with Salvador Perez this year, or if you hit on like a, William Contreras or someone that gets those plate appearances, that has a ton of value, especially in the 30-teamer. So, it's like, do we just discount, Salas now for that? So I don't,
Go ahead.
I just like saying, like, I don't know if I can really change like those guys on here. You know what I mean? I mean, even Langford too. Like, he's 22, and he's he lit the world on fire, and now he's struggling with. But it's like he's 22, so
let me touch on some of the points that you just made, because like Langford, it's interesting when you're comparing him to Jackson Chourio and Jackson Holiday, right? He is 2 years older, right? And he played college ball, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's a difference. I mean, like, I'm far more impressed with Jackson Chourio at this point than Langford, right? I mean, they both could end up being very special players. I'm not like saying like Langford's trash or anything. He's certainly not.
Yeah.
He's holding his own in the major leagues.
Yeah.
But Jackson Chouril's season is actually pretty interesting because if you look at his June numbers, he was incredible.
Okay.
Yeah, like I have his June numbers up here somewhere. Hold on, let's see, I'll find them. Like they're insane. Let's look at what he was doing in June.
I'll pull it up too. I
got it right here.
Yeah.
So Chouril's June numbers, his slash line is 315, 362, 534.
Tapping into some power. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
and
like,
that's
I think he's gonna be fine.
Yeah.
He's a really special athlete. He's and his July numbers thus far are pretty good too. But I took the June ones because they were a full month.
Okay.
So he could be a guy who really explodes in the second half. So I feel really good about number one on the list here. Jackson Holiday obviously struggled, but I think it's way too early to like draw any conclusions from that for the reasons you said. And he's actually doing pretty well in AAA right now. Langford's holding his own, but I think the big headline here is Skeens, who like clearly should be number one right now.
Yeah. There's your profit. Congrats, Gary. There's
And one of the interesting things in like evaluating prospects and trying to come up with a ranking system and a handbook is that I've weighted proximity as a factor. And obviously Skeens was not in the majors at the time, whereas these other guys were much closer to the majors, right? Because they had been in A-ball or even further up, right? So, I mean, that's one of the reasons you have Skeens, kind of at 6 and not at, closer to the top 3 or 4, right? And that's also another reason why Painter's higher than Skeens, was proximity. So, that's something you just can't account for. Guy just basically didn't pitch in the minor.
But he Strasburg did, or no, did Strasburg? No, Harper was the one I think that started.
Yeah, Harper.
Harper was
there
the one.
There some guys who just skipped the minors. It was very rare, but Skeens basically just skipped the minors. Which is pretty incredible for a pitcher. Dwight Gooden almost skipped the minors. Like he went like basically from AA to the majors at 19 years old. So it's he's a pretty special talent. Yes, and let's talk about Salas just a little bit. It's so early to write him off, but his struggles are so stark, and you have to wonder, right, whether the Padres would just demote him to A-ball and let him build some confidence up, because what is it doing to the kid?
Yeah, I mean, high A, I don't know, and that's. Does that look bad? I mean, 17 years old in AA last year. Like, it's
I know.
And I talked about Rada, again being 18 years old in double. The Angels, they don't believe in a minor league system apparently.
Right.
Just like,
they're very aggressive.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So I don't.
It's a good track record of developing talent since Mike Trout.
Yeah, that's, oh man, poor. I feel bad. I still think Jordan Adams could have been a thing. That was kind of those guys. But it was. I tried to find like a little kind of sort of. It was hard to find data when like a prospect kind of like gets like demoted or knocked down a little bit and trying to figure things out. Like I can't. It would only be kind of opinions and stuff. Peripheral wise. Like 12.5 walk rate to 23.2% strikeout rate in high A. That's not bad. Like he's not overmatched from a strikeout perspective. He has a 40% fly ball rate, 39.4% ground ball rate, 20% line drive rate. That seems okay. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's not like an over 50% ground ball rate. So to kind of like, he is an ISO under 100. Like, that's not going to work, especially if you're a catcher. But again, he's 18 years old. So it kind of goes back to like, it seems at least sort of just as little data that I have or that we have to work with, like, oh, he is a 72 WRC plus. Like, just demote him down. But, if he's under I don't have the swinging strikeout rate immediately in front of me too, but like, that's not overmatched from the strikeout perspective. That's not overmatched from like the batted ball perspective. So do you just kind of like, all right, kid, we'll sneak it, we'll put something in the water, or we'll kind of something to maybe get a little more juice on you, because I don't know if he's 19 years old next year in high A and has a 150 ISO. Like I still think you're good with it. So I don't know. That was an interesting one for me to kind of be like, I can't knock him because it seems like he's doing okay. But so what you said, he's
look, I agree with you on the metrics analysis, right? I could say this though. I put number 11 ahead of him right now.
I mean, yeah, and that's the nature of the beast, right?
Yeah. So
that's
one of the things I'm going to do, I think, next year is I'm going to integrate stats into my evaluation of the prospects, along the same metrics that you were just outlining for some of the players: isolated power, walk rate, strikeout rate, K- walks for pitchers, and assign them weights within my overall evaluation, which should it'll be interesting to see how it affects the prospects and how they shift on the list. But one of the things that we'll do for Salas is like bring him down a little bit because of his isolated power or lack thereof. So we'll see how that shifts things. But that's one of the ways I'm going to account for kind of these struggles that you see. So accounting for injuries more, accounting for performance on the field more, which will also bring certain players up. So and then I'll have to have minimum plate appearances, minimum batted base, because the stats have to be meaningful in some way. So that's a challenge, but I'm still figuring that out. A couple guys we didn't touch on, James Woods and Walker Jenkins. Woods' AAA numbers are just insane.
Yeah, he looks good. He looks. He might. I wouldn't be shocked if he's somewhat. If you bump him even like maybe above Jackson Holiday, like if because he's kind of young too. Like, and he's. He kind of, at least initially, he kind of looks it now, like initial number, Reese Hines also looks amazing right now, but he's the opposite end of the strikeout spectrum and stuff from that. So, we'll see how the rest of the season comes out, but James Wood definitely, he right now he looks it.
And Jenkins is holding his own. I mean,
he's fine where he is, just let sleeping dogs lie, just do what he does. And, if he starts to struggle or he really takes off, then, then he's good there. The one thing I did kind of note for myself in talking about James Wood and comparing him to Dylan Cruz, obviously, because they're both with Washington, right?
Yep.
So it kind of seems like a very, just kind of maybe straightforward analogy, or not analogy, but like comparison. Dylan Cruz, and again, I don't know much about, like how prospects make adjustments or like kind of the things that they do. But I noticed it was like 13.5 or 13.6% swinging strikeout rate. And the ISO, I think, was only in like the 150, 160 range. And I like Cruz, or I do like Cruz. Like, this isn't trying to knock him, but, and kind of going back to like, maybe a hit versus power or kind of thing where, if you're going to swing a little bit more, swing and miss more, have like a 36%, O swing rate, he's got to start to tap into that power a little bit more, so, does he grow more into that, or does he just make better swing decisions? I'm not going to like knock him off the top 10, but it's something to where like, it hasn't changed really in the second half going into next year. Like, is he still top 10? Is he still, like if Jackson Joby gets done with, and he's, he gets back to being, he should be in the top 10. So that was kind of interesting too, of like just one thing where am I being too hyper specific on what I'm looking for if I'm really trying to like nail this down, or is that just
the one thing I would say to that, and I agree with you, it's a valid, flag on him. The one thing, it's all in AAA, right?
Yeah.
And, he's being advanced as people predicted he would be aggressively, right?
Yes.
So I also take it with a grain of salt. Like, he's really being pushed.
That's true. Yeah.
And so what I'd be interested to see over the coming month of the season in minor leagues is like, do we see any improvement? I don't want to over-index on that because it's still going to be a relatively small sample size. We're talking about 98 plate appearances. Right now.
Oh yeah.
But do you see it, advancement, and perhaps more importantly, like what does the Statcast data show on a guy like that? Like I want to read some scouting reports, and is he like hitting the ball hard? Is he like driving it with authority? It may not be showing up in games in terms of like getting, because in order to generate ISO, you need to get,
yeah,
right,
yeah, exactly, yeah.
If your BABIP's like deflated in some way, you're not getting on base. It's not going. The power isn't necessarily going to show up in ISO. ISO is an imperfect measure of power.
Yeah.
It's a good indicator, but it's got flaws as a stat.
Yeah.
So I definitely look at it, but I also kind of like look at a guy like Cruz and say like, all right, I got to trust the scouting a little bit there, particularly given where he is on his level. And he's certainly going to be in the conversation for a top 10 guy. He could even get promoted this year. I mean, it's it's
oh yeah.
major,
Yeah, cup of coffee, lights it up. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, he's
right.
fine.
I think as Jeff said, one of the Discord chats like recently, the Nats are going to be fun to watch.
Yeah,
they have a lot of young talent.
Oh yeah. If they can, I forget what I was looking this up for. Maybe for like, I was looking at teams and payroll for like different stuff, and like the Nationals, I think had it was like the high, like it was some insane number for pitching payroll, and it was because of two players. It was because they're still paying out Strasburg and they're paying Patrick Corbin, and I think it's like $45 to $50 million between those two. So if they get this young core up and ready to roll, and then they can shed those contracts, like they're NL beast.
NL beast. Very much true. I mean, imagine having to pay Patrick Corbin and not Bryce Harper.
Yeah, I still wonder about that, because that's you resign Harper and not give Strasburg that much. How does butterfly effect of all that? But anyway, that's not prospecting. That's this is down on the farm. This is not down in the the war room or anything else. So.
That's right. That's right.
That's right.
Good steer, Frank. Good steer. You're bringing it back. Like it. So let's transition and let's talk a little bit about crushes and fades, which is one of my favorite segments of the show. Who has you jazzed up right now, and maybe who you're down on over consensus?
Maybe it's just me in regards to not talking about him or hearing enough about him, but like Jacob Wilson, like he's just putting out video game. Like it's like 85 plate appearances, but he has more home runs than strikeouts in AAA. Yeah. And he's like, I think 22 or 20, like 23 or 23. Like I know it's Oakland and that it sucks for baseball, but that's fun. Like that, you know what I mean? That's everything you want. Like I think it was 3.6% strikeout rate in AAA. He had 3 strikeouts and 4 home runs. Yeah. So he's had
a good season, and he's like his stock is going up. I agree.
Yes.
So that's a good call out. I like that one. All right.
Yeah.
Who else?
I'm still like, Cleveland pitching machine. This is very, very random. This is just a homer pick of mine. Because I drafted a lot of him this year. Alex Clemme, the strikeout to walk rate is still not that good. It's like 12.5 strikeout rate to 5 walk rate. He's 18 years old. He's an A-ball. If we're looking at very simplified metrics, since May 5th, he has like a 2.12 ERA.
Uh-huh.
Again, maybe that's more just the stuff around him. He has like a 1.1 whip. There's nothing to kind of take away the shine of like, reading that you can dream on this kid. And then I know what we do at pitching prospects. Yep. So, again, it's like, he's not like a top 100 prospect by any means, but kind of like, okay, let's, if he cuts down that walk rate, maybe not Daniel Espino, but he could be fun. So,
yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. No, that's a good call, particularly if the acquisition cost is low.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Off the waiver wire.
Yeah. Yeah, and then like we mentioned James Wood. Like I have a couple shares of him. Like he's just like he looks fun. Like and that's just really, really simple. He looks like a lot of fun. Maybe like making the Nationals fun again. We talked about him. So I traded him away in ABL, but Brandon Sproat is, that Evan got. I truly think it's so weird with pitching prospects and kind of just like, you have Cleveland pitching machine. Like I have 3 Tampa Bay Ray pitching prospects on my team. When an organization, even if it is the Mets, drafts you in the 3rd round, you're like, nah, I'm good. I'm going to go back to college. And then that same organization takes you again in the 2nd round. They clearly like you.
Yeah.
And it's clearly kind of like what you said. I don't know enough of like what maybe the mechanical adjustment or like something, but like he's throwing strikes and he's not walking people as much. Last time I checked,
No.
he's, I think, top 100 now in BA. Like he kind of broke through that.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to be fun to watch because if it clicks for him, he pitches half his games in Citi Field. So
yeah,
that's going to help him too.
Which
just as long as that training staff's like not what they did for. Yeah. As long as they could keep him healthy.
That's a big if. It's a big if in New York.
Yeah.
Something in the water in Queens.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. It's just little. Oh, it's fine to throw 100 miles an hour your first pitch of the game. It's fine. Just do it.
Yeah, no problem.
No problem. Ain't no problem.
So who do you have on your fade list?
Well, I know good old Lazaro Montes has been discussed. For the Matt has liked him. I think there's someone else that had him on the crushes. I want to say I don't dislike Lazaro. I'm not trying to call out Linney specifically, but I look on Linney's team, and Linney is currently paying $18 to Franmil Reyes. And the comp for the negative side that I've heard for Lazaro Montes is Franmil Reyes.
Yeah.
So there is, and kind of going back to like, all right, if I trade Lazaro, am I okay with it? And I think there's kind of enough of a risk there where, if he plays first base or, whatever his defensive home is, that bat really, really has to click.
Yeah.
And Prospects Live in their like their top 500, they had him 10th. Like they had him, and I think he's more in like the 50 range. Like I mentioned Bryce Eldridge before. You could probably throw him in the crush list too, but like I would have him a little bit lower. Like I'd have him in that kind of 50 range where it's like everyone that has talked about the offensive metrics that he's done so far is correct. If this dude clicks, it's insane. But there is, I think, playing time risk or other type of risk, and just the weight of the bat, where it's like, all right, if I'm wrong on this and he clicks, then I'm okay with it. I'll learn. But I see the Franmil Reyes comp. I worry that the bat is just, it needs to be so good.
Yeah.
That it's I'm okay with lowering where I value him from that perspective. And
that's fair. There's definitely risk with him. I think we talked about that on one of the podcasts. I think the one that Matt was on. Defensive liabilities and some of those risks that come along with that. His bat really has to carry. Obviously, he's having a great year in high A ball now. But the other factor to consider is he's playing in Seattle, which is a terrible hitter's park. He might end up playing his career there, but that's where he is right now. And the ceiling on the other side is like Jordan Alvarez.
And that's where if it clicks, it's
right. So I mean, is it time to sell or is it time to hold? Right. I guess it really depends on how much you can get for him and what you're getting in exchange. But there is risk there. I agree. So that's not a bad call out to being lower than consensus. Again, it doesn't mean you like the guy. It just means you're lower than consensus. And consensus right now on him is very high.
Yes. Oh yeah. I don't know where he even is now as a prospect anymore, but going back to like having to hit the ball, Elijah Green. I don't know if I would like even trade for him. And maybe that's just me completely like over discounting that, but it's there if he can figure it out, but I don't want to buy into like the draft pedigree too much. And
well, at this point, I think I talked about this when Duke was on. Elijah Green, I was coming out of the draft. I spent a really high draft pick on him. I've since traded him. In the ABL, but I still have shares of him in other leagues. His strikeout rate is stubbornly in that mid 40s. Which is just not ever going to get to the majors. And I think I said to Duke on the show when he was on is that he strikes me as a prospect that really needs to change the scenery. He needs another coaching staff, somebody who maybe can reach him. And change his approach at the plate, because if he doesn't, he's never going to get to the show.
Yeah.
I mean, he is an immense athlete, just super talented, tons of power and speed, but it doesn't matter if he can't hit the ball. And he's struggling. So, I would actually love to see the Nets trade him and see what he can do somewhere else with another organization. Maybe he has a little bit better track record developing hitters, than the Nats do. It'd be interesting to see, for example, what he did in the Braves organization or in the Baltimore Orioles organization, whether they could fix him. There are probably other organizations too, but I'm just picking those two out. But yeah, I mean, but then again, it's hard to be lower on consensus than Elijah Green right now.
I don't know, I don't really even know where, a consensus is on him anymore.
But wherever it is, you're lower.
Yeah,
that's fair.
I will. This is maybe kind of a random comp. Maybe there's better comps for it, but it does Jose Suri of Tampa Bay now. I remember him kind of coming up in the Reds and was okay, high strikeout rate, but power, speed, and he's a he's like a 6th, 7th hitter, but he's playing it's there. Guys do figure it out. So
they do.
I don't know.
Is an example.
Yeah.
Power speed combination who struck out a ton and figured it out. He still has contact issues, but they're not. I mean, he's in the majors and obviously he's an impact player. And that's conceptually there for Green, but he's got to he can't be striking out 44% of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, and even because another point is, I remember Javier Baez back in the day, I don't know if the term is getting away with it, or even if there's something where you make one adjustment and you're just so athletic that you can get away for it. But now that as you progress as a prospect, does that kind of come back just because you're not as reactionary and stuff for that too? So even if someone like Green doesn't make the majors, or with Suri and stuff, as they get older, is the kind of longevity there where
and off is this, it's speed, right?
Yeah,
because if their bat speed slows down at all, or they lose that athleticism in any way, their value plummets, right? So yeah. Anybody else on the fade list?
Not specifically anybody else. Like I said, just pitchers. I and that's that's again, maybe I'm being too risk averse on it, but I was looking at top, I'm actually gonna pull it up right now because I thought this was actually pretty hilarious. I'm gonna pull up the 2018 Baseball America top 100 list, and I'm going to talk about every pitcher that's on the 2018 prospect list. So for pitchers, Shohei Ohtani is number 2. He's Shohei Ohtani, but as mentioned, he's had one Tommy John. Does he?
He's also not
if he gets, yeah. So he's fine, but is that kind of whatever. Forrest Whitley at 10. Forrest Whitley has pitched. That was in 2018. He's pitched 10 innings in the majors, maybe. It's it's tough. Michael Kopech, who looks like he's a fun closer right now for them with a relief risk. He's number 11. Mitch Keller is number 12. He's fine. He struggled a little bit. He's kind of figured it out. He's
major league pitcher.
Yeah. Major league. He's not. He's what people thought maybe Skeens or Jared Jones would be. So he's a good number 3. For them right now. Walker Buehler is number 13. Obviously, when healthy, but he's had his fair share. Brett Honeywell.
Right now.
Yeah, right. Brett Honeywell at number 14. Another barely pit. He just got claimed. I think he just got dropped and claimed. I forgot who, but he's number 14. Alex Reyes at 17. I don't even think he's I don't even know where he is.
I'm sure Alex Reyes knows where he is.
Yeah, right. I don't know. At number 23, Luis Gohara. He was a lefty. I don't know where he's at.
I remember the name.
Yeah, exactly. Sixto Sanchez, who we mentioned at 25. And again, just to kind of like compare who else is on this list. Ronald Acuna is 1. Vlad is 2. Eloy Jimenez is 3 or is 4. Okay. Victor Robles is 5. Okay. Gleyber Torres, Nick Senzel. But at least like they're kind of, like they're playing. Like, Nick Senzel,
there's some misses there too. There's some misses there too.
But there's but like there's Bo Bichette, there's Fernando Tatis, there's Kyle Tucker, there's there's Willie Adames, so and just I won't go down too much more. Like Mackenzie Gore's been 5, but like Michael Soroka, Michael Baez, AJ Puck, who attempted to start this year, Tristan McKenzie, who looks like he needs to eat like at McDonald's every day. Like that dude is literally sticks. Like, so I guess, I look at these lists and I know it's not perfect. Like, Justice Sheffield is in here. Ian Anderson is in here. Brendan McKay is in here. Franklin Perez is in here. Dakota Hudson, Cal Quantrill. Like, so I guess it's just, if I see a pitcher in the top 100, I don't want to get too excited for them. I would.
I'm sorry. That just the one thing I would say about the prospect list that I have 4, all right, is that they are oftentimes just littered with guys based on their proximity to the majors, right? And number 2, there's a lot of draft pedigree bias. There's a lot of stickiness to lists. So once a guy's at the top of the list, it takes a very long time for them to fall down. Force is with that. So, one of the things that I've said on the show before, and I really believe it, is I try to get pitchers at low acquisition cost. And I'm looking at metrics coupled with scouting grades. But, a guy like Alejandro Rosario that I picked up this year, I really like. I picked up Yuri Perez in every league, I would say, off the wire. For nothing. But you find guys like that, and, that kind of mitigates the risk in my mind. But when you start investing early draft picks in these guys, or you pay a lot through trades for them, you put yourself in trouble pretty fast, and because there is that risk there. I think that to me, that's the moral of the story.
Yeah, and that's I guess it's your if you're risk averse or you're risk seeking. Like Tom was risk seeking and wanting to get Jackson Joey for me. Like again, like I can pull up some random list of stuff and be like, oh this is maybe why but it's like if there's something there. And Jackson Joby hits, then it's awesome. If Brandon Sprout hits for Evan, that's awesome for him.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree. But but I guess it's like just with kind of everything else, and maybe with it's just such a tough balance though, because it's like for the 30 teamer like ABL, I feel like I want to be more risk averse in that department, but in like a 10 teamer. If you think Paul Skeens, I can't not have you be like, no, don't draft Paul Skeens, or don't spend a high pick on one of those guys if you think they're going to hit, because the acquisition cost of getting replacement level value, there's just so much higher from a prospect perspective. It is. That's the flip side of it too.
Yeah, that's why I hate spending those high draft picks on pitchers. Yep.
Although
I'm guilty of it too. I traded for Espino. I gave up a 1 for him. So we all get the sweet tooth every once in a while.
Oh yeah. And this again, like I've literally saw Espino pitch an A ball. It's like I get it. He's fun. When he's on, he's on.
Yeah.
So.
Definitely. Well, listen, Frank. Speaking of being on, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was really a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
And, always glad to have new owners on in the ABL, so we get to learn about your process and approach. And you obviously give a lot of thought to prospecting and looking at analytics, but also reading a lot. We get a bookshelf behind you with prospect books. I like it.
Yes.
It's good. So we'll have you on again, hopefully. And best of luck in the NL East. You get a dog fight for the playoffs, but it'd be great to see you in there.
We're hoping.
And in the interim, for everybody else watching at home, remember to ABP. Always be prospecting.
That's right.